And once I asked to know God, that's when I started to have all of these out-of-body experiences that were happening. And I was being taken out of body while I was sleeping still, but awake. I was so aware of what was happening. I was in the cosmos. I was with my guides, and they were taking me to all different places. My walls had totally disappeared in my house, and I was having oneness experiences with God and all that is, and beautiful, beautiful unitive experiences. And I knew what it was like to be part of the trees around my property. I knew what it was like to be part of the ocean. And at one point, I felt like I knew the answers to everything. I had such more of an understanding about my life and why I'm here. And that love is what the true reality is. And that reality is so much more real than this reality.
Well, hello, Reverend Catherine Chapey. Welcome to the show. I am truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation. How are you feeling today?
Oh, I'm feeling great. Very excited to be here with you. So nice to see you again. After meeting you at the IANS conference this year. It was wonderful. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I feel great too. And thank you for joining me. The IANS conference was a great way to meet a lot of people. And fortunately, we did have some time to catch this story and prepare it all for today. And by the way, every week we bring you powerful stories about life after death, awakening, and what it means to be human. And if that resonates, you'll love what's coming. Today I'm joined by Reverend Catherine Chapey, an ordained interspiritual minister, spiritual counselor, medium, trance channel, and certified hypnotist. She serves with Spiritual Awakenings International and facilitates experiencer circles, including Safe Space, UFO/ETE experiencers, and spiritual experiencers. Now, Catherine's journey began early. Born 2 months premature and kept in an incubator, she later understood she was never really alone. Sensing a spiritual family from the start, her path moved through evidential mediumship at a spiritualist church where a striking podium message, "Don't pray to me, pray to God," opened unexpected doors in her life. And from there, she describes profound mystical states, guidance from teachers, and striking light phenomenon, green orbs, salmon-colored discs, and a powerful Metatron download connected to the Merkaba. Today, we'll look beneath the mystery and into the meaning. Catherine, it's a joy to have you on the show. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Brad. Thank you for having me.
It's great. As we said, we did get a chance to meet at the International Association of Near-Death Studies conference a few weeks ago in Chicago. What a great experience that was. And you shared a series of experiences that you were having there, and certainly why you were connected to the organization. So you have so much to talk about. I think, if you could start from the beginning and tell the stories, kind of the background, and then build up through the story. And I know you have some beautiful material to share as well. So I'd like to hand the microphone and the stage over to you.
My experiences actually started at birth, and I didn't find that out until later in my life. But I was born 2 months premature, and I spent the first month or so in an incubator where nobody could hold me, because back then in the 60s, people were under the impression that the premature babies would be harmed if their parents held them. So I spent over a month by myself in the incubator. And, I came to learn through my spiritual guidance that I was never alone, that I was actually not in my body most of that time, that my consciousness was out of my body and with my spiritual family on the other side. And I was shown that, and it was really, when I realized that, I was really grateful that I didn't feel that as a newborn. So when I was a little child, I remember there were several things that happened that were very pivotal in my understanding about who I am as a person, as a human, it became clear to me at a young age that I'm not just this physical body, that there's so much more to me than what I've been told. And one of the ways that I discovered that is that I would periodically wake up and feel that I was in a state of where I couldn't move. I felt that there was a presence in my room that was right next to me. And I felt that this presence had control of my body and I could not move my body. And I would try my hardest to move, but I couldn't. And then when I would make a little sound, like I would try to scream, the little tiniest sound would just, I would snap back into my body and then I would be able to move. And that happened to me several times as a young kid. And I learned over time that's called sleep paralysis. And that is when our body goes into a paralysis state while we're sleeping so that we don't act out our dreams and don't do harm to ourselves. And what I've also learned is that when we are sleeping, we are actually, our consciousness is, out and about. We're doing different things. We're, sometimes we're able to remember what we're doing through the dream state, different types of dreams that we have, and other times we're not able to remember it all. But our soul is actually out of our body and our body is resting. So I also was raised in a very strict kind of way as far as religion. We had to go to church every Sunday, and we were told that the reason that we were doing that is so that we wouldn't go to hell. Yes. And so that, there was a lot of fear that was taught to us as young kids about the devil and sinning. And if you do a certain type of sin, that's a mortal sin, and you can't get out of hell if you commit a mortal sin, and just all of these fear. And that's the way I, experienced it as a younger child. And I remember we had these neighbors that my brother and I would go over their house because their kids were our age, and they lived up the block from us, and we would go over there and we would always have so much fun, and their parents were so loving and kind. And I remember I was being told, only certain people were going to go be able to live with God when they died, and not everyone. And so I went home and I asked my mother, I said, are our friends up the block, are they going to hell because they're Jewish? And my mother said yes. And I remember just thinking, that's just not right. That's not true. I knew that wasn't true. There's no way. And I must have been about 8 years old trying to figure this stuff out. And I also had this little prayer book that I ripped the pages out of, and I made I tried to take the most non-dogmatic prayers that I could, and I put them all together in my own little prayer book, and I would say those prayers. And anytime I would say those prayers, I would feel this instant connection to Mother Mary and Jesus, just this like this softening that would come over me, and this peace that I would feel. Like I felt like they heard me, that they were with me, and that I didn't have to worry. And those were some of the pivotal moments in my early upbringing, and trying to understand what I was being told versus what I was feeling and what I was experiencing. So I knew that God was love. I knew that we are all part of God, and that God is not a punishing God. And so that just I knew in my heart from when I was a little child. I had a bunch of things happen to me as a kid where when I was a young kid, I was being, it was a very traumatic experience where there was abuse in the home, and I was being chased and attacked, but I ran into the bathroom to avoid the attack, and I locked the door, and this abuser was pounding on the door. And I remember my hand on the doorknob and thinking, okay, either I unlock the door and allow him to come in and beat the hell out of me, or I keep the door locked, but then he'll get even more mad and he'll be even, more violent towards me. So my hand's on the doorknob, and I don't know if I opened the door, if I didn't open the door. All I know is at that point, I just have a memory of being above in the corner of the bathroom above the door and looking down at the abuse that was happening. And so anytime I remembered that as an adult, it was always from that vantage point where I was out of my body and looking down at that. And that happened to me a couple times over my life, where I had those kind of experiences where I was deathly afraid that I was going to be hurt, or, like a life-threatening type situation where I was out of my body. Other things that happened where we did these games as kids. We did it one time where a kid learned about it, where they would, the other kid would breathe really heavy and deep, and then a kid would come up behind him and just like do almost like a Heimlich maneuver. And please don't do this. It's very stupid and dangerous, but we did this as kids. We heard about it. And I remember they did it to me, and I fell over, and I felt like I was in another realm. I was experiencing all different beings, and I felt like it was a familiar place to me. It felt love. I felt, lightness. And I felt that I was out of my body for about an hour and a half. But when I came to, the kids told me I had passed out for about 15 seconds. So those were just things in my early life that were pivotal, moments where I understood I was much more than just a physical body. So as I became an adult, I started to have some spirit contact with my grandfathers. And one of them, when I would talk about him, I would smell his cigars. Okay. And nobody around me was smoking cigars. And then another time, my other grandfather, who had passed away, he had come to me in a dream before he passed, like a week before he passed, the night before I was going to see him. And he showed me where he was going on the other side. He had a house there, and he was introducing me to all kinds of beautiful light beings. And I felt like I knew them, but I didn't know them. So it was a beautiful experience that I had with him right before he died. I didn't know there was a term for that at the time, and that's called a shared death experience. And I've come to learn that through my journey. But shortly after my grandfather died, he was 99 when he passed away. I was working on a job, and there was a gentleman on the job who had, sadly, he had taken his own life. And some of the guys on the job had pushed him out of his position, and they did it intentionally. And but they were playing games, like they were pretending, to be his friend and blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, he had come to me in a dream, which was actually a visitation shortly after he passed away. And he was smiling and beaming, and he was just like, "I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm okay." And I was just so happy to see him. And then I went to work the next day, and I told the guys at work that I had just seen our friend, and one of the guys made fun of the way he took his life, and they all laughed. So being, I was very upset about that, because they were pretending to be his friend. And then, so anyway, I went out to dinner with my mother. We were at a restaurant or a diner, and I was telling her this story. And as I was telling her about it and how these guys behaved towards him, and then what they said about him and how I was so horrified, he walked right across the parking lot, and I was just like, and oh my God, there he is. And so how can he be, he crossed over, but he's here, and he looked as solid as you and I. He didn't look like, a spirit, right? So he just looked over at me as if to say, yeah, I know what's going on. I know what's going on. So shortly after that, I started to get really curious, and I really started to feel like I wanted to be around other people that were having spiritual type experiences. And so I just Googled spiritual communities or spiritual centers in my area. I didn't know what exactly I was looking for. I just didn't want anything with dogma, and I didn't want a religion. But I wanted something where people were exploring their spiritual life. And I found spiritualism, a spiritualist church. And synchronistically, that very day that I was Googling that, my friend at the time, and I'm still good friends with her, she called me up and she had no idea what was happening with me and all this stuff. But she said, "Oh, Catherine, I went to this spiritualism church and so wonderful. And I kept thinking of you. And they're all about, there's no dogma. They're about the golden rule and personal responsibility." And she said they have inspirational speakers and the ministers are both male and female. So they're very much about equality and all of the highest truths, and she said, and then she said, and there are mediums that come in and they are trained mediums and they bring in evidential messages to the people in the congregation. And I was like, oh my God, this is a sign, because I had just seen it on Google and was curious about it. So I ended up going, and the first time I went, they had a medium that, it was time for the mediumship part of the service. And she got up and the place was packed. And she said, "Oh, the lady all the way in the back with the pink shirt on, I'd like to come to you with a message. Is that okay?" And I said, "Yes." So she described my grandfather. She talked about some of our last moments together. The things that she described his hands, because I was holding his hands and his hands were very soft because he was like 99 years old when he passed away. And some of the things that he said to me, and then she said to me, "He wants me to tell you, don't pray to me." And I thought, well, what? And then I realized he must have heard me, because a week before I had been asking him when I was on my patio for help with one of my children, who I had been really, really fighting hard to try to get her help and services with different things that she had been going through most of her life. And I just kept hitting brick wall after brick wall with that. So I was turning to him for help because I figured he saw the bigger picture from where he was over there, But he said, "Yeah, don't pray to me," So I took that very seriously, and I really started praying to God. And I kept him in the loop, right? I kept my guides in the loop because I knew I had helpers and stuff. And door after door started opening, and I was able to get my child some help that she really needed. And it was just wonderful. It was really miraculous the way everything opened up. So with that, I just felt so happy. Like I wanted to tell everyone, we all have help, we don't have to struggle alone, And so I wanted people to know that and to feel that in their own life. So I started to sit in circle every week at the Spiritualist church to develop my mediumship and to learn how to connect with the spirit world, and then to give messages to people that are in the congregation every week. And so that's what I did for about 8 or 9 years there. And I became a spiritual healer through the Spiritualist church. And I thought I was going to become a spiritualist minister, but I ended up going in a little bit of a different direction, which is similar yet even more expansive as far as I feel or I felt. So I ended up becoming an interspiritual minister. But during that time, very early on, when I started to sit in a weekly circle to develop my mediumship, we had a wonderful mediumship teacher, and he was also a minister at the time. And he would take us on guided meditations, which really helped me to learn how to quiet my mind. And I never thought I was going to be able to learn how to meditate because I had a lot of monkey mind going on, a lot of chatter in there. And so, but he was really wonderful. And so I learned how to quiet my mind and to meditate and follow along with the guided meditations. And then eventually I was able to just quiet my mind into that stillness. But shortly after learning how to meditate, I started to ask to meet my spirit guides. And the first time I saw my spirit guide, I was in circle, and I saw her foot and the end, like the bottom of her robe. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I just saw my spirit guide's foot, So it was exciting, it was a fun time because, you're not given too much all at once, you're given just little pieces, just, a little bit here, a little bit there. And so I kept at it, and I started to ask at home to meet my spirit guides. And I would sit, in meditation at home and connect in with my grandfather and do some automatic writing with him and my grandmother. And but one night before I was going to bed, I was asking to meet my spirit guides. And in the morning, they started coming to me. And before I go into that part, I want to say, because there were two separate awakenings that I had, and they were like within about 4 months of each other. And the first one was in 2007, like around November-ish, and I was in meditation in the Spiritualist church, and we were going through this meditation through the different chakras. And once we reached the top, the crown chakra, she told us to envision a flower, any kind of flower we wanted, opening, and to ask for anything that we wanted. And I asked to know God. And once I asked to know God, that's when I started to have all of these out-of-body experiences that were happening. And I was being taken out of body while I was sleeping still, but awake. I was like having there's a certain type of dream where you're awake, but you're really asleep, and I forget the name of it. But I was so aware of what was happening. I was in the cosmos. I was with my guides, and they were taking me to all different places. My walls had totally disappeared in my house. And I was having oneness experiences with God and all that is, and beautiful, beautiful unitive experiences. And I knew what it was like to be part of the trees around my property. I knew what it was like to be part of the ocean. I knew what it was like to be part of the sand, and it was so beautiful. And there's no words really to adequately describe that type of oneness and unitive experience, but it was very blissful and joyful. And at one point, I felt like I knew the answers to everything, and I of course I don't anymore, but that was a feeling that I had. And then I felt like I had such more of an understanding about my life and why I'm here, and just that love that is what the true reality is, and that reality is so much more real than this reality. And so it was really a beautiful time in my life. And so shortly after that, that's when I started to ask to meet my spirit guides. And then one morning, after I was asking to meet them at night before I went to sleep, as I was waking up, I started to see them one after another, after another, after another. And they were smiling at me. And I was in two worlds at once. I was still in this physical 3D reality, but more of me was in that spiritual realm. And so my body was going into like these automatic yogic positions and I don't do yoga in this lifetime. I wish I did, but I don't, and I didn't at that time. But my body was just going into these different kind of like natural, very gentle type yoga positions. And I remember I was merging in with different guides, and I was feeling all this love. And then after there was a lot of different guides. And then at one point I went to touch my bed, the foot of my bed, which was like there was like this, like a charge that came out of my hands. And I remember I was like, whoa. And then I looked over at my cat, who had been sleeping above my head for like the last several months. And I looked over at him, and he was just in this energy too. It was almost like he was doing his own little poses. And I just thought, oh my God, little guy is really into this too, and it was just amazing. And that's when it dawned on me that he had actually been protecting my crown chakra. And so that's why he slept above my head all of those months. But there was a being that started working with me, and he was very intense and yet very loving. I couldn't see him, and he was the only one that I really couldn't see during that time. All the other guides I was meeting, I could see them, and they were different spiritual teachers and different people in history that I knew who they were. But this particular guide, I didn't know who he was, although we had like telepathic communication for hours. And at that time, he was downloading all of this information into my heart. And I felt like it was something that I would really need to know, and I felt like I was going to be tested on it, so I was really trying hard to remember everything. But there was so much of it that I can't even describe to you. I can't even put into words.
So, Catherine, that was quite a story, very involved, lots of plot twists and character development. It's amazing that in the very beginning, you talked about how early on you had sleep paralysis. And oftentimes, sleep paralysis is the process to do the OBE, to get to the other side. And it sounded like you were sort of describing it as dream, maybe a lucid dream-ish, but it's kind of an out-of-body experience that is even higher resolution and more real than this physical manifestation that we have. In fact, sometimes when folks come back from that, they kind of think of this as the dream, and that's the reality.
When I had the sleep paralysis as a kid, I was not having the what you just described as the lucid dream. Okay, I was kind of stuck in that in between, and because of my fear of the devil at the time, my automatic response was fear, right? So I was aware there was a presence like right here, and I thought it was the devil. But over time, once I started to, open up to, my own mediumship and my own spiritual development and wanting to be more in touch with that, and also asking to know God, that's when I was having the lucid dreams where my walls would disappear and I was out of my body and in the other realm where it was much more real than this reality.
Right. And that's what I'd seen and heard as well, is that the fear will actually stop you from entering that space, or it'll cause you to sort of manifest kind of frightening experiences on the other side. If you can go into sleep paralysis and find yourself going to the out-of-body experience to the other side and know that it's pure love and that you're eternal, then you can literally manifest and experience that when you're over there. And that sounds like what you ended up doing on the spiritual realm side that you mentioned. So that's pretty nice. And you mentioned also, that on that side it's pure love, which is very common also, and that fear and fear-based ideas and ideologies really can't even exist over there. So sometimes, oftentimes we hear the fact that we actually manifest in this form to have experiences here that we can't have on the other side. And so we can go into lower density and lower frequencies and have these, opposite, polar, sort of darker experiences over here. And yet, we are slightly protected, because it sounds like when you were young and you were in that situation with the door locked, if something's going to be traumatic that'll happen in this physical world, you might pull yourself out of it and observe it rather than like fully participate in something that's darker. So that is quite a journey. So now I know you had some materials that you wanted to share also. Do they factor into the story now?
This is my QR code if you want to find out more about me and the groups that I have. I have 4 monthly groups that I host and facilitate, and they're all on Zoom for anybody that is interested in being part of these groups. I have speakers that come in for UFO ET experiencers, and then the people in the Zoom room can ask questions after the speaker shares their story. And then it's also spiritual experiencers. It's the same format where a speaker comes in and shares about their journey, and then we have Q&A. And then I have a Safe Space Sharing Group and Long Island, New York IANS, and those are sharing groups. So, and it's all about all of these topics, NDEs, STEs, OBEs, all of the different types of topics that we're talking about tonight, and also UFO ET experiences. And so that's where you can find me. And then this is from my Long Island IANS group. I just started that about a year ago. That's my newer group. The UFO ET experiences started in 2016, and then it all kind of developed since there. And now all of them are on Zoom. So this is my little booklet that I told you about that I had as a kid, where I put my little prayer book together and I would say my little prayers. I will go back to my story with the being that I was with for hours and hours. This being was very intense and very loving, and he was such a big part of my awakening. And so I was always curious who he was. And then about a year after I had that big awakening, I asked him one night, I said, I really want to know who you are. And I knew who everybody else was, but I didn't know who you were. Can you please show me in a dream? And as I was waking up in the morning, I was seeing a disc like this, but it was interdimensional. I could see it going in and out of reality. And over the disc was the Merkaba. It was like a shape of a Merkaba. And then above it, it said Metatron. And then, I had heard of Metatron, but I really didn't know anything about him. And I Googled it, and then I found out that he was one of two archangels that were once embodied. They were once humans, and then they ascended into archangel. And he is the scribe for God, and he's also oversees the Akashic records, and he's very much involved in the ascension process for our human evolution. So I was really, really, really touched and really really happy to know that was him, and that made a lot of sense to me based on what I was experiencing. So in the Spiritualist church, we would sometimes have these workshops. And one day we had a workshop about orbs. And so we had a visiting medium come in, and her husband, they were both mediums and ministers. And so they had us stand in front of this black velvet curtain. And then we had to put like this black, a sheet or something over our body, and then we would ask for whoever it is we wanted to come and show up in an orb to appear. So I asked my grandmother and my grandfather, I said, can you please show yourselves and show up in orbs, and if not, can you just show up in some way? So the guy took the picture, and back then it was 35 millimeter camera. And everyone went, oh, like that. So I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to see the picture. So he developed the picture there. And then 2 weeks later, I put my glasses on, my reading glasses, as I'm looking at it more closely. And I see my grandfather's face is in this orb right here. It's the same exact picture that you see over here of my grandfather. My mother painted that hung in his house my whole life. And in this picture, in the orb, you can see it's the same kind of profile view. The only difference is his mouth is open a little bit, like he's talking in my ear. Here's his ear. Here's his eye, his other eye. Here's the shape of his head, goes back around here, right? Here's his mouth right over here. And you can even see his glasses if you look really hard. Now, sometimes it's hard to see. So the way you can see this is to just kind of soften your gaze when you're looking at it. And then you'll see in the pixels what I'm talking about. But it was really amazing when I realized that. I'm like, oh my God, he really did show up. He's in the orb. And then my grandmother, her face is in here. Now, right in the center, there is a face. This is the head. This is an eye, another eye, a nose, and here's her mouth. And she's still kind of forming. She doesn't look exactly like my grandmother, but she's forming. I figure she got caught midway there. And then this orb up here, and in the real picture, right, the colors are much more vivid, and it was like greenish and blue, and it reminded me of the earth. So, and then back here in the pixels of the picture itself, my grandfather's head is right here, right? You can see his ear, his other ear. Here's his eye, his nose, and then his mouth is here. But I can see his whole face, his whole head. And this is my grandpa. This is like a couple years before he passed away. And he was in his 90s in this picture. So that's when I learned about orbs and how spirit travels in orbs. That's one way that they travel, and they can actually appear to us if we ask for them. And so shortly after, I ended up leaving the Spiritualist church in 2015. I was there were things that were going on behind the scenes that I couldn't really didn't sit well with me. So it didn't resonate with me anymore, and I left. But I was told that was part of my schooling, and there was going to be more that would be happening, and that was just, that it's all in divine order, and it's okay. I was exactly where I needed to be. So this was okay. So what happened was I left the Spiritualist church, and I started to meet with some women that were having their own little groups. It was a bunch of mediums, and they would do we would give each other messages and stuff. And I started to channel with a couple of the ladies there. We would stay after and do this channeling, almost like inspirational talk, but it was channeled. And so I started to channel a collective, and that was the way that I describe it is it's like a higher wisdom that comes through, and it's our direct link to with me. It's like the way I describe it is it's my higher self and God and my team, but it's a collective, and it's many different beings. It is not just one being when somebody channels like a spirit or something like that. So I started to have different phenomena that was happening in my room. And this one happened where there was a periwinkle orb in my room, right? And then all of a sudden, because I was so filled with all of this love and joy, because I was seeing all of these different feline beings and these beings that were coming to me, and I was connecting with them in a way that I had seen earlier in meditations, that there were such thing as feline beings. They were not cats. These were beings. They had robes, and they were very beautiful, healing type of beings. And these beings were working with me. And the women in this group that I was meeting with every now and then, they would say to me, "Oh, I see this being with you, and he's got this long robe on, and he's bringing in all this light and healing and everything." So one night I wake up, and I didn't wake up, I'm sorry, I couldn't sleep. I decided to go outside and take pictures. And so I took a picture in my room, and this orb showed up, right? And then my daughter had just gotten me this for one of my Mother's Day gifts. It was a cute little thing that said, "Let your light shine." And the reason I'm bringing that up is because all of these synchronicities happen around these kind of events. And then I just felt compelled to go outside and take 4 pictures. And I've never felt that way before. I had been in my house for 20 years. Never in my life did I feel like going outside at 11:30, 12 midnight and taking pictures, right? So here I am. I take a picture all the way to the left when I step out my patio. Then I take another picture. Then I take another one, and okay, this is like a column of light that's coming down. And this is what the ladies were telling me in the group. One night they said, "Oh, you have a portal in your yard and a magic tree." So I thought, oh, well, maybe that's the portal. When I was studying the pictures, when I went back in the house, I saw that tube. It's like a tube that's floating in my yard. I was like, what is that? And then I noticed on my shed was when I enlarged this picture, I can see Mother Mary. And she's one of my main guides. Her and Jesus came to me during my awakening. And she actually, the night before that, and I can't go into the whole story, but she appeared in my room And she wanted me to have placed my crystal pointing my crown. And then I woke up, I moved my crystal so the point of it was facing my crown. And then when I was waking up in the morning, I saw this beautiful white feline being that was morphing out of my ceiling. Okay. So, and she had this beautiful divine mother energy, this feline being. And I just remembered that I was just thanking her over and over, like, thank you, I love you, you know? So then when I was taking these pictures and looking at them, I was like, oh my God, there's Mother Mary on my shed, you know? And I was blown away. So this picture here, I took one video, okay, after I took the 4 pictures. And the one video that I took, and I don't have it here, but it's in my, collection. There's like a little light that comes like really quick out of where this column of light is. And when I went back into that video and I did it frame by frame, what came through was this is what came out of where that column of light is, okay? And in one tiny little frame, I was able to capture this little green orb, right? And it was just in one of the little tiniest frames. It's amazing that I could even get it. And at the time, I was going through acupuncture. And so I'm laying on the table, I'm having acupuncture, and my guides are talking to me. And I said, oh my God, what was that golden disc that came out of that column of light? And they said, oh, that was us. Did you like that? And I go, oh my God, that was amazing. And I said, what about that green orb? I said, what was that? And they said, if you look closely, you'll see there's a white feline. It's the white feline being. And I said, no way. And they go, yes, go home and pull it up on your phone and you'll see. So that's what I did. I pulled it up on my phone, and when I pulled it up on my phone, it was 111. And a lot of times these numbers come in, they're part of the synchronicities that are going on when you're having these kind of spiritual experiences. So in this picture, I can see the feline's eyes. I can see its nose. I can see part of its chest where it's white. His head is kind of tilted a little bit. And this is it a little bit enlarged. It's a little hard to see, but the eyes are here, the nose comes down, and then I can see the chest. And if I go back here, you could actually see it a little bit better. But on my phone, it's a lot more clear. So this, with the pixels and stuff.
Okay, well, that is an amazing orb with the feline image in there. And I know you've got a lot of experience with felines in different forms, and that's great. And it's interesting to think about, extraterrestrials and what form they come in. It's kind of crazy. And I'm hearing a lot of rumblings these days that, they call it sort of first contact is really going to be happening in the next year, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. And by the way, whenever that does happen, it really feels like it's going to change everything. It doesn't feel like there's going to be, invasion of, the Martians or something. It's going to be a wonderful experience coming down to share that and open our eyes to so much more reality, maybe a lot of things that have been hidden from us in the past. So that is phenomenal. Thanks for that. Now, I do want to transition into this next beautiful segment that I have that's called Heart's First Whisper. So in this, we really get to know Catherine a bit better. There's questions that I ask that you answer with your heart. No thoughts or mind required. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Beautiful. All right. Well, here's the first one. How did the early incubator experience and later sense of never alone shape your baseline trust in the unseen?
The incubator experience, although I didn't know until I was an adult, actually, that I was never alone during that time. And that really shaped my trust and knowing that I am never alone, because what happened during that time was my guides had told me that they did not prepare me enough for the lack of love that I would experience in my earlier life. And when she told me that, I said, well, what do you mean? You guys are perfect. What do you mean you didn't prepare me enough? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you prepare me enough? And so she took me on a journey into the other realm and showed me my pre-life planning, and how when I was in that energy, it was just so beautiful, and there was so much love and joy. And I was actually with one of there was a lion being there who was part of my higher self team, and he's part of my soul, actually. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. And she was trying to get me to understand, and my guides were trying to get me to understand what exactly I was taking on in this lifetime. Because when I was over there, I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this. And they were trying to get me to understand how challenging and how dense and how heavy it would get at times. Okay. But it was hard to hold that kind of energy where I was. And I kind of describe it like it's when, and a lot of, the women will understand this, when you're in labor, right? And you're getting ready to have that baby and you're feeling the intensity of that pain, you start second guessing what you've taken on, right? Like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? This is insane. This is torture. It's the same thing. We forget, and as women too, we forget that pain. We forget the intensity of that pain once that baby's in our arms and we fall in love with that baby. And, so it's a different frequency there.
Oh, for sure. And, it's interesting how you described it too, because for a month, maybe plus, they couldn't pick you up. Yeah,
Right.
back then they thought, well, that might introduce infection or something, and then that
Right.
would risk of life, and so they kept you separated. And in that, that's not what is meant to be. It's meant to be held and connected heart to heart and so on. And so missing that shapes your experience for sure. But later in life, as you really connect to the spiritual side, you realize your guides
Yes.
are always looking over after you. And so even in those moments in that first month, you were certainly protected as well.
I was with them. I was mostly with them. Yes.
And they were with you.
Yep.
So that's a beautiful thing. I love it. Number 2, how did the don't pray to me, pray to God moment change your daily practice?
That was like a light bulb that went off in my brain, because as soon as she said that, your grandfather said, don't pray to me. And I got a little confused because I didn't really think of it as praying, but I guess it was in a sense, because I was asking him for help. So I realized, you know what, he's right. I need to go straight to God and ask God for help. And so that's what I did. And that was a really, really powerful teaching, not to go to, somebody else, not to pray to our guides, not to pray to our, ancestors, to pray straight to God. And God hears us whenever we talk to God. God always hears us, even before we talk to God.
Right. Many times I hear the praying is sort of the asking, and then maybe sometimes the meditating is waiting and listening for the answer,
Yes.
So that seems to work if we work that way. Well, that brings us into number 3, which is, why do evidential moments land more deeply than abstract beliefs?
What I've learned on my journey is that I made a decision to come here to Earth and to forget who I truly am, right? And so who I truly am and who we truly all are is love. And we're all part of God. We're all connected, right? But when we come into these bodies and we incarnate into this earthly realm, we have something called free will. And we also have, the ability to make choices at every moment of our life. So when these evidential moments happen, I think they are just reminders that, what we're experiencing is true and real and valid. And it just helps it to land and stick with us. The thing that's helped me a lot on my journey has been taking pictures, documenting. I've been documenting my journey for like almost 20 years now. And so it helps me so that, because after a while you start to think, am I making this up? And then you go back in and you're like, no, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Right. That helps you validate, those experiences, right?
Yes.
Because the belief is like, I think so. I kind of believe it.
Yeah,
But when you have those evidential moments, that's more of a knowing. And
that's
then when you are able to circle back and close loop, validate those things over and over, you're kind of tuning your intuition in some ways or those experiences to know that they're real.
that's
So
right.
that makes them very powerful.
It's not a belief anymore, it's a knowing. Exactly.
Exactly. And that's a big difference. Well,
Yep.
thank you. And then number 4, how did you learn to discern genuine guidance from imagination during those unitive experiences?
There's no way that you can be doubting that what you're experiencing is true, right? So that love that you're feeling is so much more intense than any love that we experience in this lifetime. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was going through my awakening, at one point I was meeting my 2 main guides, Mother Mary and Jesus, and I was with Mother Mary, and we were together, and she was like channeling some things through me, and as she was with me, okay, like our consciousness was kind of like melding. There was an entity that tried to get into the room where we were. And this entity I experienced as the devil, right? So I looked at her like, what's going on? Like, how is this guy here when you're here? That doesn't make any sense to me. And she just went like shrugged. So I turned to this devil that I, interpreted that way. And I said, you need to go. And I pushed him out the door. And then he came back in and I said, no, you need to go. You're not welcome here. And then I slammed the door shut and I turned and I went right back in with Mother Mary and that beautiful energy. So what I've learned and many times over my journey is that when we are in fear and we attach ourselves to that fear, that strengthens the fear and can bring us down. But what we pay attention to grows. So when we're paying attention to love and joy and peace and all of those beautiful types of energies, right? And we're invested in those kind of energies. That's what will grow in our life too.
I like that for sure. Where we focus our energy and our frequency is what we will attract. If it is low, it's going to bring in some dark energies. If it is high in pure love, maybe unconditional love on a good day, it's going to bring in, like you said, Mother Mary and all sorts of other great experiences.
Yes.
I love that. And that brings us to number 5, which is, hey, what did it feel like to merge with the oceans and the trees, as you mentioned? Were there any lingering after effects?
Yes, I love my trees. I adore my trees. And so, yes, when I merged with my evergreen trees, I have big Leland cypress trees that I planted on my property when they were only little 3 foot tall. And now they're like 30 foot tall. And I know they are protectors and they are sentient beings. They are alive. They are aware and they are filled with love. It's just amazing. So I have a really, really deep connection to trees and especially all the trees on my property. They're magical. They're magical beings and they will heal us if we ask them to work with us and heal us. They will do it, and so, and they'll communicate with us too in ways that we will understand.
Well, that's interesting. The phrase, have you hugged a tree lately? I
Yep.
think that's what you're talking about. You could literally, that sentient being that is that tree, that feeling, that healing energy, you could go hug the tree and you might feel a hug back.
Yeah, and you could actually sit under the tree and ask for healing or just touch the tree with both your hands. I had a headache last week that totally left when I asked the tree to take it away from me and bring it down into Mother Earth. And it was gone. In 20 seconds, it was gone. So.
Nice. Well, I, in the backyard, planted a whole bunch of fruit trees this year, one by one with, focused attention on care and then put them in and talk to them the whole time and visit them all the time and water them and, you fertilize their stakes and the whole thing. And they are so strong and leaves are pure green and lovely. So I don't know, I guess you push a little love in there and you get a little love back.
You know it. They feel it.
I like that too. Well, hey, that takes us over to number 6, which is, how did the telepathic heart download practically change your choices over the following year?
honestly, after those experiences, I felt reborn. So I felt that my whole, the way that I viewed life was completely turned inside out. And what happened with me was that I went from being a person who was constantly ruminating over why me, like, why did this happen to me? Why did I grow up in the type of family that what's wrong with me that that kind of stuff, to I am not a victim of my childhood, and I chose my parents. I chose the challenging situations that have happened in my life, and that I know to be true with my own journey, that I chose it for my own spiritual evolution to go through those experiences, although they were challenging. So it was like a totally different way of looking at life, of experiencing my past, and just being in more of a heart-centered way. And I also was really committed to service and helping others to open up and to have their own experiences. Because once we have our own experiences, like we said, we're not just believing anymore, we're knowing. And once we know, we can't unknow, right? You can't ever go back to where you were before once you have that direct experience. So it's my absolute joy when people have direct experience, and I hope to be able to facilitate that for people in this lifetime.
Wow, and I'm sure you are. And your beliefs can change, from day to day, but your knowing, I love that. Your knowing is a knowing, and so you don't stray from it, and you don't forget it, and you can't really unknow it because you had that experience. So that's cool. And I really liked how you mentioned that earlier in life you may have had trauma, and you may have had yourself positioned in a sort of a victim role. And with this, you can also choose to overcome that, choose to step away from that, as hard as that might be. And to do that, to empower yourself and to truly feel and live love inside your heart. Beautiful. Well, that takes us to number 7, which is, why do you think the message arrives symbolically rather than verbally?
There was a lot of telepathic communication that was happening between us. So there was a certain amount of verbal, but it was telepathic. Okay. And then there was the symbols, which were the things that I was to remember about this experience that was so abstract that I can't even put into words what was happening, because it was like in another realm, but it was also this realm. And it's just one of those experiences that there is no language to describe it. And I think those are the types of experiences that really are like embedded into our very core of who we are. And so I know everything that I learned in those hours, those were hours that I spent with him. I know that in every fiber of my being, and it'll never leave me.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. On this earthly plane, with this physical manifestation, we're limited to these, English words that we use, and clearly there's other languages and so on. On the other side, thankfully, you are not limited to that verbal communication. Why would you ever reduce the flow of information between, yourself and Metatron and others by limiting yourself to the English language? So that makes tons of sense. So
Right.
telepathic and symbolic and so forth, and downloads. And yet when you come back to this side, we don't have that capacity to hold the entire story and the entire knowing. So you bring back the fragments that you can, so that you do have the knowing, but sort of missing a lot of the details because they just can't make it across.
It's always there as part of who you are, as a soul, as a person. But to be able to verbalize it, you're not able to do that. But one thing he did with me was he initiated this almost like a sign language type of connection that comes over me, and they told me it's called a soul language. Some people call it light language, but it was told to me it's a soul language, and that automatically connects me to God, to my team, and to him.
Wow. Yeah. A lot to learn, a lot to pick up, a lot
Yeah.
to gather. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And we
Mhm.
go into number 8 now, which is the notion of documenting or sanity checking all the footage you have, the golden disc, the green orbs, the salmon discs. It's like before you would share this as that process of evaluating it, seeing what's in those images. What's your process for that?
I have been documenting my journey since, probably about 2006 or 7. And not only through journaling, but I, have documented through pictures and videos, and I also channel, which I have over 700 channels, transmissions from my team that has come through me. And so for me, that helps me to, because they work with me in my own life, in my own process. But then eventually this work that is coming through me from them, I am wanting to share with others so that others can learn how to do this also in their own life, so that they also have this connection, so they also can feel like, wow, I can turn within and I can ask my higher guidance, I can ask God, and everyone's unique in the way that they will receive and have that connection and communication, but everyone can do this. Everyone can do this.
Well, that's key. And that's why a lot of people watch these podcasts, because they like to hear your experience and they like to do it too. Now, we're going to share your website and all your services in just a moment. But you know what I've got? I've got the final question for Heart's First Whisper, which is number 9. And number 9 is simply, how do your circles create safety for first-time experiencers who fear being judged?
I go over guidelines before we have our sharing groups. And our part of our guidelines are that we are not here to give advice, and we're not here to judge anyone, that we're here to listen, to share, and to learn and grow together, because we're all teachers and we're all students, right? And each one of us has our own unique experience. Each one of us has a piece of the puzzle, right? So when people come to the sharing groups and they're hearing other people share about their experiences, I've had people that would cry because they've never been in a room where other people are able to share these kind of experiences so honestly. We've been told, many of us are very isolated or have been very isolated our whole lives and have not been able to share our journey for fear of being told we need to go into a mental health system, that we are having, psychosis. And it happens more than we know. That was one of the things my guides told me. They wanted me to see what happens to people, especially in this part of the world, in the United States, where they're having spiritual awakenings, but they're being told that they have some kind of psychosis or bipolar disorder and they need to be medicated. So what they told me back in 2008 is that there's going to be a lot of people waking up and having spiritual awakenings, and that I was going to be part of, helping those people to understand their experiences and what they're going through, and that they are not going crazy.
And you are helping that for
Oh,
sure.
yeah, definitely.
Yes,
Definitely.
exactly. And, that is exactly what's happening. It's 2025 now. And so I feel like it's happening. It's turning into a bit of an avalanche. I don't
Yeah.
think folks have to be so worried about sharing these experiences. Now they are, and they need help in understanding this. And this is why, we're here for sure. Now, you have so much to share. Now, thank you for sharing what you did, which is a small sliver of all your experiences on today's podcast. We will definitely have to do it again to get chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Who knows, right?
Yeah, we'll do it again. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Well, I tell you, just what message would you like to share, some wisdom with folks until we meet again?
Right now, we're living in some challenging times, okay? But they want you to know that we are going to come through this stronger than ever. And by all of us doing our part, right? Like you're doing your shows, I have my groups, everybody has their own mission, right? We're all doing our mission. And And just keep at it, whatever you feel called to do, whatever it is in this world that brings you joy, that makes you happy, that makes you light up, that where you're connecting with other people, and bringing love into the world in some way. That's your joy. That's why you're here. And just keep doing that. Right now, we're seeing a lot of chaos in the world. And what I'm being asked to remind people is that that there's a bigger picture going on, bigger than what we can even begin to imagine. And part of this is there's a lot of healing work. When you're doing spiritual work, there's a lot of healing work that also has to go hand in hand with that. Otherwise, you can't you can't anchor into that love, because you're still kind of like getting triggered, and different things might set you off. But once you do that healing work, you're able to stay in that place of peace. And that's what we are coming to. It may not look that way. It may look like this chaos is gonna just, get worse and worse. But I have been shown, and I can assure you that things are going to get better. We're going to come together, and we're going to be united. And not only humans, but we're going to be united with our galactic families, our interdimensional families. And we're going to be, I just heard the word rocking it. Like, we're going to be like, yeah, we did it. We overcame the darkness, and now we're on the upswing, So I just want to tell you, hang in there and just keep doing your best every day, and stay in that love frequency.
I love it. That's great advice. Everybody can take that. Stay in that love frequency. Find the thing that is your passion, that brings you joy, because it's kind of hard to be, snarling and kind of mean and awful when you're finding your joy. And the more everybody on this earthly plane is enjoy the higher frequency of the collective, as well as the planet, as well as, like you mentioned, cracking over the other side, to put polarity behind us and find a whole new world.
That's
Well,
right.
thank you, Catherine. You're bringing today, it's amazing. You're bringing your tenderness and your courage to these stories, from the incubator to Metatron, from orbs and discs to everyday miracles of prayer and community. And, for listeners who've had experiences and don't know where to bring them, Catherine, you've got your facilities, the welcoming circles, the safe space UFO/ET experiencers, the spiritual experiencers. Let's talk for a minute just about those websites and links where folks can find you.
Right now, I have a website, and it's through Bitly. So if you open up the QR code that I put in the beginning of the video, you will see all of my stuff. I have Facebook groups. I have my 4 different groups: my safe space sharing group, UFO ET experiencers, Long Island, New York, IANS, and my spiritual experiencers group. So, and you're welcome to come to any or all of those. And we really have a fun time. Those groups are from 7 p.m. Eastern time until about 8:30, 9 o'clock. So they run an hour and a half to 2 hours. And we really have some deep, really profound conversations in those groups. So I'd love for you to be part of those communities if you're interested.
Great. And I will have all those links in the description below, so it'll make it so easy for folks to just go below and click and join. And I like that. They can click join. It's an hour and a half. And they will connect with like-minded folks.
That's right.
So that's beautiful.
There's no judgment, and people are actually nodding their head when you're telling your story. They're not looking at you like, whoa. So it's wonderful.
Well, and as you mentioned before, some folks are not used to that because they feel like they're being judged all the time. So isn't it kind of nice to get into a circle of like-minded folks who just support each other?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's life-changing.
Yeah, exactly. For you, for me, everybody involved. I agree completely. Well, Catherine, thank you for sharing your message and your light with us today.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you for having me. And I so appreciate you doing this, bringing all of your beautiful talks out into the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure hosting you today. And again, I'm sure we'll do it again for chapters 3, 4, and 5. And to our listeners, if Catherine's story moved you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And let us know in the comments. I love getting in there and getting busy in the comments. And if this episode spoke to your heart, share it with someone who might need a little light today. Alrighty, and until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and go beyond the illusion to discover your true self. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.